So today we're talking about games that took us a long time to beat, and I have a lot of those. And the most profound example of that for me is probably the original Resident Evil. Now this game hit different back in the day. You gotta remember, back in 1997, most games were divided up into clearly defined levels, and Resident Evil didn't really do that. And it was one of my first games that didn't really do that. It was just, it was a little over my head. Keep in mind, I was like 9 at the time. Probably shouldn't have been playing the game in the first place, but anyway. And on top of that, the game just played different than anything I'd ever played. I'd never played a game where it took more than one button to shoot. I spent a whole afternoon trying to figure out how to shoot the damn gun. I couldn't figure it out. And of course it's in the manual, but I didn't read the manual, right? Who reads the manuals? Not me. So I ended up actually almost quitting the game right then and there on day one, but I called my friend and he explained, oh, you have to hold down the shoulder button to lift up and aim the gun, and then you press X to shoot it. And I was like, okay, that's insane, but all right. So then I kept playing it. I got a reasonable chunk of the first mansion part done, but again, I just kind of kept getting pulled away by, the Crash Bandicoots and the Spyros and the Medal of Honors and other stuff out there. And that pattern just kind of kept repeating for the next several years, but I stayed friends with that kid, the one that explained to me how to shoot the gun. And a few years later, I ended up sleeping over at his house, and he had an older brother who was really good at this game. And, he was like 15 or 16. So, to us, he was basically a wizard. He was a wise wizard on a mountaintop somewhere. And so he was just playing the game for fun, just blowing through it. And later that day, I went home and I duplicated about as much of it as I could from memory. And I got to the point, I got to the snake, and I don't remember where I got stuck after that, but I did get stuck again. And so I ultimately, I put it down again. And so even more time passed. But at some point, in my mid-20s, somewhere in there, I did come back to it. I had a real marathon with it. I found one of those 200-page strategy guides, printed the whole damn thing off, stapled it together, took it over to the TV, and I played this game from beginning to end, and I had a blast. And it was always a game that I knew I liked, but since I had never properly finished it, I just didn't have a full opinion of it until that point. So it's just this big, long rigmarole. It took about, 15 years or so for me to really, truly see it all the way through. I'm glad I finally did, though, because, of course, it is one of my favorite games of all time. Certainly one of my favorite horror games. Probably my favorite Resident Evil game.